Be a poet, did you ever have like a vision of the role of your role as a poet, or what a poet could be, might be, what you could, I mean, did you ever, or is that something that's just developed along with your life, or do you ever even think in those terms?
I had very simple ideas about what to do, and they haven't changed that much. One was to write good poetry, to try to write good poetry, and that was poetry which I would measure against what I thought were the great poems of European and Asian tradition. You know, measuring myself against Du Fu or Ben Jonson, not measuring myself against them, but using them as touchstones. You know. So having the right touchstones. And the other thing is paying regard to the issues that come right in front of you, like the problems and the questions of politics and history that are right on your doorstep, not to turn your head aside, not to avert your face. So what has really come into my life as issues that I could not avert my face from, since I was raised in the West Coast in a logging family, have been the issues of ecology and species destruction and the destruction of life on the planet, which I don't see as theoretical issues, but a lot of the time I take them as front yard, hands-on issues to take care of in my own life. So doing what one has to do and trying to be a good artist. And so I'm going to open tonight with a few of the little songs for Gaia in axe handles. Gaia, the old Greek name for the earth goddess, brought back into some currency again, as I'm sure many of you have heard, by the Gaia hypothesis of James Lovelock and Lynn Margulis, a biochemist's hypothesis that the biosphere is, in a sense, one living organism of considerable age. Fun to think of in that way. So these little poems are some attempts at trying to grasp the different dimensions of that, like this. As the cricket's soft autumn hum is to us, so are we to the trees, as are they to the rocks and the hills. The way this poem came about was one summer 12 or 15 years ago. I was sitting by a campfire late at night, chatting with my friend, the poet who has since vanished, Lou Welch. And after a long silence, Lou said to me, "Gary, do you think the rocks pay any attention to the trees?" And I said, "I don't know, Lou, what are you driving at?" And he said, "Well, the trees are just passing through." The Manzanita succession story. Shady lady makes the boys turn gray. That's an obscure poem. But, you know, I'll tell you this story. After a fire in most of Californian-type forest ecology, that is to say in the pine forest ecology, after fire, Manzanita will be, in much of California, will be the first post-fire succession plant. In fact, Manzanita does very well after a fire. It helps the little seeds to germinate. It will come in after the death of a whole bunch of pine and oak and will establish itself for quite a few decades. And then in the shade and in the new soil and in the moisture that is created under the Manzanita thickets, again, little oak and little pine will get started, and eventually they'll push through the Manzanita canopy, overshadow them, create their own canopy, and that canopy will kill the Manzanita, which is not shade tolerant. And so, shady lady makes the boys turn gray. Log trucks go by at 4 in the morning as we roll in our sleeping bags, dreaming of health. The log trucks remind us, as we think, dream, and play, of the world that is carried away. Dead doe lying in the rain, on the shoulder, in the gravel. I see your stiff leg in the headlights by the roadside. Dead doe lying in the rain.
You were there at the first, I mean, you helped create the first Being. It seemed like at one point that was the future, and now it just seems like one of the futures.
What was that future, I wonder? What were we thinking that future was? A kind of a communalism, a cooperative society, a low consumption, relatively non-material, cooperative, playful social world, and where you could wear some beads and feathers and go swimming naked and not get picked up. It's not too big a dream. I would say it's definitely one of our futures. In fact, what is funny about it, it is simply is one of the futures that has been appropriated and will be, it's a mainstream future. It's a mainstream future, but that doesn't take away the contradictions and the problems of our material affluence and our industrial inertia and the destruction of natural systems. A little historical poem, Building. We started our house midway through the Cultural Revolution, the Vietnam War, Cambodia in our ears, tear gas in Berkeley. Boys in overalls with frightened eyes, long matted hair, ran from the police. We peeled trees, drilled boulders, dug sumps, took sweat baths together. That house finished, we went on. Built a schoolhouse with 100 wheelbarrows. Held seminars on California Paleo-Indians during lunch. We braised the Zhou dynasty form of the character Mu on the blacksmithed brackets of the ceiling of the lodge. Buried a 5-pronged vajra between the school buildings while praying and offering tobacco. Those buildings were destroyed by a fire, a pale copy rebuilt by insurance. 10 years later, we gathered at the edge of a meadow. The Cultural Revolution is over. Hair is short. The industry calls the shots in the people's forests. Single mothers go back to college to become lawyers. Blowing the conch, shaking the staff rings, we opened work on a hall. 40 people, women carpenters, child labor, pounding nails. Screw down the corten roofing and shape the beams with a planer. The building is done in 3 weeks. We fill it with flowers and friends and open it to our hearts. Now, in the year of the Persian Gulf, of falsehoods and crimes in government held up as virtues, this dance with matter goes on. Our buildings are solid, to live, to teach, to sit, to know for sure the sound of a bell. This is history. This is outside of history. Buildings are built in the moment. They are constantly wet from the pool that renews all things, naked and gleaming. The moon moves through her 28 nights. Wet years and dry years pass. Sharp tools, good design. I think what I have learned looking at history happening around me for 40 years now is that there is a tremendous karmic inertia. That which is in history is in history. And you can't shortcut history. It's going to have to work itself out. Maybe individuals can kind of leap out of time in their own lives, in their own lifestyles. But the whole social and cultural process is going to have to work itself out infinitely slower. And so that's why, having accepted that, that's why I have more patience and am willing to hope for a kind of ecological stabilization in 300 or 400 more years if we write a lot of good poems now. Night Song of the Los Angeles Basin. Owl calls, pollen dust blows, swirl of light strokes writhing, not tying light paths, the calligraphy of cars. Los Angeles Basin and hill slopes, checkered with streetways, floral loops of the freeway express and exchange. Dragons of light in the dark sweep going both ways in the night city belly. The passage of light end to end and rebound. Ride drivers all heading somewhere. Etch in their traces to night's eye, mind, the calligraphy of cars. Vole paths, mouse trails worn in on meadow grass, winding pocket gopher tunnels, marmot lookout rocks. Houses with green-watered gardens slip under the ghost of the dry chaparral. Ghost, shrine to the Los Angeles River. The Jinja, the shrine that never was there, is there, where the river debouches. The place of the moment of trembling and gathering and giving, so that lizards clap hands there. Only lizards come to pray, saying, "Please give us health and long life." A hawk, a mouse, the slash of calligraphy of freeways of cars. And into the pools of the channelized river, the goddess in tall rain dress tosses a handful of meal. The gold bellies royal, the mouth bubbles, the frenzy of feeding. The common ones, the bright-colored rare ones show up. They tangle and tumble. Godlings ride by in Rolls-Royce, wide-eyed in brokers' halls, lifted in hotels, being presented to platters of tidbit and wine, snatch of fame. Meal gone, the water subsides. A mouse, a hawk. The calligraphy of lights on the night freeways of Los Angeles will long be remembered. Owl calls, late rising moon. We barely know what the laws of nature might be. But we do know that it has a complexity and a completeness that we can only guess at. And that there are enormous energies at work that make it possible for the golden plover to navigate 15,000 miles and land on one island in the Aleutian chain. That's one kind of example. Shall we say that this great orderliness is like a clock, as they did in the 18th century? But modern physics finds too much variability in that. It's more like the imagination. It doesn't run on clockwork. It moves in an extraordinarily harmonious but relentless way, and yet it is not ultimately predictable. And so there's something that carries over to the mind from that. But what is the mind? What part of that? That larger process is, our own inner processes can be nothing but part of that. And so the freedom that our imagination gives us is in a way the same as the freedom that natural processes have to be unpredictable. This is the third poem in my oeuvre dealing with naked bathing. The first was called The Public Bath, written about life in Japan. The second was called The Bath, about bathing children in the sauna. And this recent one comes out of a get-together of adults after a number of days of conferences in Alaska on the intellectual and literary future of Alaska. Well, don't laugh. The future is a lot better than the past. It can only get better. This is on Baranof Island, out in southeast Alaska, near Sitka, in midsummer, so you get the long midsummer night. Right on the beach. Now I must sit naked, socks and glasses tucked into my moccasins, wearing only earrings and a faded tattoo. On a cedar bench too hot to touch, buttocks take it, legs fold, back eases onto the burning wall, sweating and the in-breath cooled through a wet-soaked towel, an old Aleut trick, and look out the small window on a snow-capped volcano, and inside toward the stove the women who sweat here and groan and laugh with the heat. The women speak of birth at home, of their children. Their breasts hang softer, the nipples darker, eyes clear and warm, naked, legs up. We have all raised children. I could love each one, their ease, their opened, sweet, older, still youthful, womanly being bodies. And outside, naked, cooling on the deck, midsummer's far northern soft dusk eve, bare skin to the wind. Older is smarter and more tasty. Minds tough and funny, many lovers. At the end of days of talking science, writing, values, spirit, politics, poems, different shoes and shirts in little heaps, sit naked, silent, gaze on chests and breasts and knees and knobby feet, in the tide smell, on the bleached deck planks, like seals hauled out for sunning. Crinkles by the eyes, limber legs crossed, single mothers past parenting, back to college, running a business, checking salmon for the fish and game, writing a play, an article, a novel, waitressing and teaching, in between men friends, teenage son, doing a dissertation on the humpbacked whales, doing tough-assed poems, naked comfort, scant fear, strong soul, naught to hide. This life. We get old enough and finally really like it. Meeting and sweating at a breezy beach. The story of the girl who married a bear is the classical reference, the classical story that this poem makes reference to. One of the great things that you do in poetry is have fun with mythology. That's the story that is told all over North America and well down into, well, all over Alaska and Canada and well down into the lower 48. Of the young woman who opened up a relationship with the bears, partly because she broke taboos, which showed that she was interesting and smart, and so they took an interest in her, and partly because they had a message that they wanted to get to the human beings about etiquette. And so they had a meeting of the animals. Only Wolverine wouldn't go. Wolverine said, I don't want anything to do with human beings. If you want to try to have good relations with them, that's up to you, but I'm leaving. And Wolverine still will have nothing to do with human beings. But the bears, actually, although they were offended by the way they were being treated, they nonetheless wanted to keep good relations, you know, because animals, for the most part, actually like us. That's something to understand. I've noticed it. They like us. They think we're cute. So they sent this young, handsome male bear to get this young lady and take her with him and marry her. Well, it wasn't really legal. And she had a couple of children by him. And in the process, he taught her some songs and some etiquette that should be done by human beings. Her brothers killed him, but that was all part of the deal. He's sort of a Christ figure. He sacrificed himself. And that's why ever since we've known better about how to relate to bears. But the poem really is around the fact that a black bear has been living in my neighborhood for about 6 months now, and has been leaving large piles of bear sign everywhere, right near the house even, and has been a very good bear otherwise. It's a wild bear, obviously. It's not getting into garbage cans. It's not trashing anything. It's moving very decorously through the landscape. Some people have seen it. And it's really very wonderful to have this creature with us, because there should be such a creature near us that would be part of the community if the community is intact. So we feel our community is a little more intact now. So this poem is called Right in the Trail. Here it is, near the house. A big pile, fat scats, studded with those deep red, smooth-skinned Manzanita berries. Such a pile. Such droppings. Awesome. And I saw how the young girl in the story had good cause to comment on the bear scats she found while picking blueberries with her friends. She laughed at them, or maybe with them. She jumped over them. Bad luck. And is reported to have said wide anus to amuse or annoy the big brown ones, who are listening, of course. They say the ladies have always gone berrying, and they all join together to go out for the herring spawn or to clean green salmon. And that big set of lessons on what bears really want was brought back by the girl who made those comments. She was taken on a year-long excursion back up in the mountains, through the tangled deadfalls, down into the den. She had some pretty children by a young and handsome bear. Now I'm on the dirt looking at these scats, and I want to cry, not knowing why, at the honor and the humor of coming on this sign that is not found in books or transmitted in letters, and is for women just as much as men. A shining message for all species, a glimpse at the trace of the great ones passing, with a peek into her whole wild system and what was going on last week. Mostly still Manzanita. Dear bear, do stay around. Be good. And though I know it won't help to say this, chew your food. Poetry's role is, one of poetry's roles is like the role of myth. It's a contribution to the role of myth. It's a working together with myth. Or it's the poet as mythographer. Not only seeing a new view, but presenting a new view. And Robert Graves would have us believe that that it is not just that poetry comes to this and does it because it's right, but that it is an inherent, essential part of poetry from the Paleolithic, that it defend nature, for one thing, and that it defend human nature, for another thing. That's the Gravesian connection with the earth as muse, the goddess as muse to the poet. I think there's a metaphor of truth in that, an image of truth in that ultimately we speak on behalf of the elegance, the orderliness, and the freedom of the mind, which is to say of the natural world. Word basket, woman. Word basket, woman. Years after surviving the Warsaw Uprising, she wrote the poems of ordinary people building barricades while being shot at. Small poems were all that could hold so much close-to-death life without making it false. Robinson Jeffers, his tall, cold view, quite true in a way, but why did he say it? As though he alone stood above our delusions. He also feared death, insignificance, and was not quite up to the inhuman beauty of parsnips or diapers, the deathless nobility at the core of all ordinary things. I dwell in a house on the long west slope of Sierra Nevada, 200-mile swell of granite, bones of the ancient Buddha, miles back from the seacoast, on a line of fiery chakras in the deep web nerves of the land. Europe, forgotten now, almost a dream. But our writing is sidewise and Roman, and the language a compote of old wars and tribes from someplace overseas. Here, at the rim of the world, where the Panaka calls in the Cha, the heart words are Pomo, Miwok, Nishinan, and the small poem word baskets stretch to the heft of their burden. I came this far to tell of the grave of my great-grandmother Harriet Callicott by itself on a low ridge in Kansas. The sandstone tumbled, her name almost eaten away where I found it, in rain-drenched grass on my knees, closed my eyes and swooped under the earth to that lone dark, holding her emptiness, and placed one cool kiss on the arch of her white pubic bone.